Hey guys, we're going to be jumping right into the action today and getting to the top end on this Raptor 700. The next video following that is going to be me putting the motor into the quad and finishing it up. But the quad is actually completely done as of now, and I may or may not have leaked some photos on my Instagram page. So you guys can check that out. It's at Michael Sabo 350. Got a couple cool pictures up there, plus I like to add some other stuff on there, so go ahead and give me a follow. Alright guys, you enjoy this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, I'm about to put the rings on this beautiful CP piston. Just thought I'd give you a second look at it before I start working on it. This thing is really nice. There's no markings that tell you the front and the back, but the intake valves are bigger, so that's the giveaway. This is the back of the piston, this is the front of the piston. And also, if you put the markings on the bottom so that they're readable, and you flip it around, this is the front. So when you're putting these rings on, you want to make sure you're putting everything in the right directions. Your oil rings go on this bottom portion. Good idea is to look at your old piston, as long as it was installed correctly the first time. And if there's any markings on the rings, you can see these little ends, you want to make sure that they're facing up. If you look at the back side, there's no markings. Most manufacturers do have some sort of marking on the top side of the ring. So just refer to your manual and make sure you're putting these in the right order. So the first thing we're going to put on is our oil ring expander. Then we're going to put the smallest rings in the package, the oil rings, upper and lower. They go on the top and the bottom of the oil expander. And the way I like to do this is you put one end in, get it started, and then you kind of walk the ring around. And just give it a little encouragement until it fits in place. And you want to make sure your ring gaps are in the right spots too. There is a diagram in the manual that shows you where they go. So our oil rings are on. Now we're going to put in our second ring, which is the second down from the top. It's the wider ring. It's usually a little bit darker. Make sure that marking is on the top. And once again, just going to put in one end, and then you kind of walk that ring around and get it to fit in the groove. Now finally our top ring. So I have all my rings set, all the gaps are in the correct places. If you're doing this, just make sure you check the manual, make sure you get them in all the right spots. I could show you where to put them, but you're better off just looking at the manual while you're doing it, because that way you don't screw up. And so all I'm going to do is throw our wrist pin in and our clips, get it on the crankshaft, and then we'll slide our cylinder on. Now I'm going to try my best here, but these CP circlips are really thick and hard to work with. You can see this compared to the OEM one. They're really thick and difficult to manage, and getting the one on the bench on the other half was hard enough, so we'll see how this goes. God damn it. Those are by far the hardest piston circlips I've ever had to deal with. So I'm going to readjust my rings, just make sure that everything's lined up, because I was playing with that a lot. I'm sure they moved around. And then I'm going to throw my gasket on and my cylinder and torque it down. Alright guys, so let's see if we can get our cylinder on here. First thing we're going to do is throw our gasket on. Make sure you have it oriented correctly. Pull our timing chain through. Take your time with this stuff. You don't want to rip the gasket or do anything wrong. These are pretty critical steps. If you do something wrong, you're going to tank your engine. Now I'm going to pop these dowels in place. That'll hold our gasket. So we're getting ready to throw the cylinder on. You can see I have all our gasket surfaces nice and clean. Don't want to have any leaks or anything. So I got this all ready to rock and roll. Now before you go sliding your cylinder on, you want to make sure that all of your rings are oriented correctly, because we put the piston on and everything. There's a good chance that the rings got moved out of orientation. I did have to play with mine a little bit and get them back. They had nudged out of place just a little bit. And the other thing you want to do is take some motor oil, and we're just going to coat a very light coat on the inside of this cylinder and just rub it around. Alright, now to get the cylinder on here, literally according to the manual, you just squeeze your rings and slide on the cylinder. You want to make sure that your chain slide goes in the right slot. And I like to leave my cam chain hanging down, get the piston in, keep it at the top of the piston stroke so you have some space. And then once we get the rings in the cylinder, then we'll pull our chain through. And once again, guys, take your time with this. This can be really frustrating. Alright, so now our piston's in, so we can slide our cam chain through. Make sure everything's lined up right, you don't have anything crossed or folded over. Double check your gasket. And we'll just push our cylinder on. Line it up with your dowels. Nice and easy. You can see my cam chain bound up a little bit. If you force that on, you cause damage. Take your time. Now we're going to be putting our cylinder head bolts in. Believe it or not, you're actually supposed to lubricate the threads of these bolts as well as the mating surfaces where the head reaches, so right in here. Now I'm going to run these in with the impact. There's actually 2 cycles that we follow to tighten down the head. We're going to go in a crisscross pattern. First cycle is 11 foot-pounds. And then our second cycle will be 36 pounds. And then of course we have our cylinder head timing bolts. According to the manual, these get spec'd to 7.2 foot-pounds. I'm going to be going to 9 foot-pounds. So next we're going to take our chain slide, slide it right down into your channel. Fits right into this groove, nice and easy. Now we'll put our dowels in. Now we're going to be putting our gasket on. Before you put it on, make sure your gasket's nice and clean, and also make sure there's no oils or anything on the surface, the mating areas of your jug and your cylinder head. Make sure you have it oriented correctly, as always. So just place it on here nicely. Our dowels will hold it in place. Make sure it's nice and flush. You don't have any intrusions or anything sticking up. Now before I put my cylinder head on, I'm going to take a zip tie here and wrap it around the timing chain. And that way, if our timing chain falls into the motor, we're going to be able to pull it out, and we're not going to have any issues getting it back out. So here's our cylinder head, nice and clean. Take the zip tie and pull it through our cam inspection window. And just pull that through as best as you can so you can get everything in place. Now we're going to take our bolts. I have them coated in some molybdenum grease. Now there's more bolts for our cylinder head, but I'm going to tighten these down first. These get tightened to 25 foot-pounds. Now we have these bolts that go in upward on either side. So I'm going to put those in now. Make sure you have your washer on there. And these get tightened to 27 foot-pounds. And then the last two bolts for our cylinder head go right here. And these get tightened down to 7.2 foot-pounds. And like always, I like to go to 9. Alright guys, we're going to put our sprocket gear on. Now I'm going to do my best to show everything really clear here, but it might be a little hard to see. So what we're going to do is take a 22mm socket that's going to go in our crank bolt right here, and you can turn counterclockwise with a breaker bar or a ratchet if you don't have a breaker bar. I think our mark's actually right there. There's a tiny marker on the flywheel, and then there's a mark right here on our inspection window. So you want to turn counterclockwise. You got to be careful that nothing gets bound up. If something binds up, you usually have to play with your timing chain just to make sure the sprocket isn't making the chain get all bound up. So you turn this until you find your mark. I'm going to have to turn it all the way around because we were actually right there in the beginning. So there's our mark. You have the H and then the I. Right there is the I. So we want that to be lined up perfectly. Now, when I pulled my head off, I wasn't able to turn this motor to top dead center because the crank was seized up. So this is actually upside down. Our cam gear needs to go on this way. It goes over the auto decompression lever like that, and it needs to be turned all the way this way. So this has to be rolled, and I have the tension of the valve springs pushing on this, so it can't just be turned by hand the way it is now. So I made a tool. It's kind of chop shop. You can see it here. It's 2 plates of steel, two 15/64 drill bits that fit in these holes nice and snug. I would use long bolts and put them in here, but I don't have the right size. It's a special machine thread, and then I put it between 2 vice grips. It's nice and tight, and I'll put them in there and spin it. But before I do that, you want to make sure that your piston is not at top dead center, because when you're spinning this, the valves are going to hit the piston. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate my crankshaft so the piston is lower and we have room for our valves to move, and then I'm going to flip over this cam. You want to make sure you're going counterclockwise. If you feel anything binding up, do not force it. Alright, so now I can pull our chain out and we can get our piston back at top dead center. Alright, so our piston is now at top dead center again. So we're going to throw our timing gear on. Now, you can only have this the right way. You can't put it in the wrong way. This is the wrong way, there's no markings. The right way has the marking in the front. Really easy. You can see it's going to go on here, and these little pins are going to line up. Can't really mess it up. Now we want this cam gear to line up with this little mark right here. So as long as these 2 marks are lined up once the chain's on, and our 2 marks on the stator cover are lined up and the flywheel, we'll be good to go. So we're going to go ahead and put the gear in the chain and then put the gear on the cam. So just like with everything else, take your time. You can see we're off a little bit here. I like to just lift up right here and spin the chain, spin the gear rather. Looks like right there is going to be perfect. Now I'll throw our cam bolts in, and these get tightened down to 14 foot-pounds. Okay guys, I just want to show you how I'm leaving this before I put my tensioner on. You can see the hash mark in there is lined up perfectly good. And then up here on the cam gear, you can see that's lined up perfectly good with this right here on the case. So that's good to go. Now we're going to throw our cam chain tensioner in with our new gasket. You want to make sure the plunger is all the way depressed. And then torque this down to 7.2 foot-pounds according to the manual. I'm going to do 9. Then you put your spring in, and then you put your cat bolt in with your copper washer. Push the spring tension in, and your cat bolt will bolt or screw right in. And this is going to get tightened down to 14 foot-pounds. Check your marks to make sure everything's lined up before you put your covers on. And we're getting ready to put our cam chain cover on here, but before I do, I'm going to take a little bit of assembly lube and just put it on the timing chain in here. Also took a tiny bit of motor oil and put it on our new O-ring. And once again, these get tightened down to 7.2 foot-pounds. I'm going to do 9. Put this water line on along with the fitting. And yet another one that calls for 7.2 foot-pounds. And I'm tightening it to 9. Now we'll put on our oil delivery line. You can't really put this on backwards. See, if I put it this way, it's not going to line up. Flip it the correct way. Lines up perfectly, bolts right into your cylinder here. So I'm going to take our little bolt here and just put it in place. We take our bolts with new copper washers. One goes on the top and then one goes under the line. Before I tighten these down, I want to tighten this bolt down. We're going to go to 9 foot-pounds. The manual calls for 7.2. Now we'll tighten down our oil lines. These go to 14 foot-pounds. And the last thing I'm going to put on before we put the motor in are these two flywheel and crank inspection windows. I got some new anodized covers because the OEM ones were thrashed. And of course, don't forget to put a new spark plug in. Make sure to check that your gap is in spec. You're looking at 0.028 to 0.031 if you're going to run the stock spec, and that's inches, not millimeters. And then this is going to get tightened down to 12 foot-pounds. The manual calls for 9.4. I just like to do 12. Boom! There it is, guys. The motor is 100% complete. All I got to do is throw it in the frame now and get this thing back together. Shouldn't be too hard to do. I cannot wait to get this thing fired up. Alright guys, so I'm going to cut it there. The next video is going to be me taking the motor and actually putting it in the frame, doing the final assembly, and just doing finishing touches and things like that. I'll tell you what guys, the quad looks badass. It turned out way better than I thought it would. Once again guys, remember to add me on Instagram. You can also add me on Facebook as well. My Instagram is MichaelSabo350 and the Facebook is ATVCrazy91. Alright guys, I'm going to cap it here. Have a good one.